When people talk about building vocabulary in a new language, the advice is usually the same. Read more, listen more, use words in sentences. And those absolutely help. But today, I'm going to focus on something a bit more practical. In this video, I'll share 3 methods and 3 patterns which helped me build Swedish vocabulary much faster when I first moved to Sweden, especially when my goal was clear, to communicate in daily life and eventually work in Swedish. And because of that goal, I focused mainly on high-frequency words, the words people actually use in everyday conversations and professional environments. First method is learning words in groups or categories. Our brain remembers information better when things are connected. So instead of learning isolated words, try learning a small group related to the same topic. For example, if you learn the word arbete, work, expand the group to Arbeitsplatz, workplace, Arbetsgivare, employer, anställd, employee. Now, instead of learning one word, you understand a whole context around work. This makes vocabulary easier to remember and much easier to use in real conversations. The second method is expanding one root word using prefixes or suffixes. Once you learn a word, look for its different forms. For example, ekonomi means economy. A different form, ekonomisk, economic, ekonomiskt, economically. Another example, producera means produce. A different form, produktion, production. So from one word, you suddenly gain several useful words. Instead of memorizing everything separately, you're building small word families. This is a very efficient way to grow vocabulary quickly. The third method is learning oppositions and synonyms together. When you learn a word, ask yourself, what is the opposite? What is a similar word? For example, learn hög and låg together, high and low. Another example, snabb and långsam, fast and slow. You can also learn synonyms like jobb and arbete, both can mean work. Learning words in pairs or groups like this helps your brain organize vocabulary more clearly, and it also makes your language more flexible. Before we move on to the 3 patterns, there's one important principle that made the biggest difference for me, regardless of the method. Focus on high frequency and relevant vocabulary. There are thousands of advanced words in Swedish. Areas like literature, history, geography, or academic writing. But if your goal is to communicate in daily life or build your career, those words are not your priority. Unless, of course, those areas are your profession. There's always an exception, I know. But my point here is, focus first on everyday conversations, workplace vocabulary, words commonly used in meetings and discussions. That's what helps you communicate. When I first started learning Swedish, I noticed something really interesting. Many Swedish words are very similar to English, sometimes identical. For example, information and organization. They're spelled exactly the same in Swedish, only pronounced differently. Information and organisation. Once I noticed these patterns, my vocabulary started growing much faster. Now let's look at these patterns that make Swedish vocabulary much easier for English speakers. The first pattern is words ending tion or sion. These are often identical or very similar to their English equivalents. I've just given you a couple of examples, like information and organization. There are many more words like that. For example, presentation, passion. If you already speak English, many of these words are immediately understandable. That means you can build vocabulary much faster. Another pattern that is very useful for verbs is that you can often convert an English verb into its Swedish counterpart by adding era or ra in the end. For example, the word plan in English, make a plan, you can add era in the end to make it its Swedish counterpart, planera. Another example, produce. You can add ra in the end to make it its Swedish counterpart, producera. Once you notice that pattern, many new verbs become much easier to recognize and remember. The third pattern I noticed is that Swedish often works a bit like Lego. Words are frequently built by combining small parts. I call it compound words. Let's take a couple of examples. The word bok means book. The word hylla means shelf. Putting these two together, you get bok, hylla, which means bookshelf. Another example, mat means food. Bord means table. These two together, mat, bord, means dining table. When you understand the building blocks, you can often guess the meaning of long words. That makes the Swedish vocabulary feel much less overwhelming. By the way, I put together a short guide with more explanation and many more examples of these patterns, including additional vocabulary, short sample sentences, and compound words. If you want to review them later, you can download the guide for free through the link in the description. These methods and patterns helped me expand my Swedish vocabulary much faster. Instead of memorizing everything randomly, I focused on connections, patterns, relevant vocabulary. But there's still one key element behind all vocabulary learning: repetition. Research in language learning often shows that a word usually needs to be encountered around 10 times in meaningful contexts before it actually sticks in our long-term memory. So review words frequently. Use them in conversations. Notice them when reading and listening. That's how vocabulary gradually becomes natural. In the next video, I'll talk about another challenge many learners face: speaking Swedish with confidence. Because very often the real problem is not vocabulary, it's the hesitation to actually use it.